I think that everybody has something to share with the world, their own personal experience that gives hope to somebody else. And that's really all I'm trying to do here, is provide that light in the darkness, that just because, a doctor has told you that they can't help you doesn't mean that you can't get pregnant. Just because you can't afford IVF doesn't mean that you can't get pregnant. Just because for religious reasons or whatever, that doesn't mean that you can't get pregnant. This is my purpose.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hoke, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show Erica Hoke, and she is an infertility coach, an author, and publisher on a mission to empower infertility patients and disrupt the reproductive medical system. After being told she had less than a 1% chance of conceiving naturally, she refused to give up, and now she is a mom of 4. Listen to that again. So that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about the fertility journey and what it looked like for her, having every test you can imagine, and she tells you about all the diagnoses that she was given and literally told that basically she would never get pregnant. And the journey that she took to help herself do this. Like, she just took it upon herself to do the research and the trial and error. And we talk about the overlooked testing and how people can really take control of their health experience, and, what it looks like to get second opinions, and really the practices that it took to help her get to get pregnant. And we also talk about the mental health part of this and what it looks like when your fertility journey is not ideal, right? And we talk about miscarriages and what happens with the mental part of that, and the mental health part of going through fertility treatments, and that there is this what happens afterwards situation where people go through their fertility journey, and there is a trauma there is aftermath of what happens after going on this journey. So many really insightful things, and I feel like this is a conversation that not a lot of people are having about infertility. So she really does take kind of a different perspective, and I just love everything about it. All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Erica, and we are talking about infertility, but taking a little bit different conversation around infertility. And Erica and I were talking before we hit record, had a handful of conversations around infertility on the show. And Erica really hones in on the mental health aspects of this. And I love this deep conversation. So I'm excited to get Erica's insight and have her share a story. But thanks so much for joining us today, Erica.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes. So can you just share a little bit about what you do? And I guess it's probably an important place to share your story, because that's kind of what, pushed you into this realm. And, you talking about infertility, and you have 4 kids, people are like, wait, what? So let's share that part.
Yeah, exactly. So all those kids were born after 35 too, which I think is important to highlight.
Totally.
Because that is the magic number for people's psyche of, can I get pregnant? Can I not get pregnant? Oh my goodness. Right. So at that point in my life, at 35, I knew that I might have some problems getting pregnant. I had some diagnosis prior to that, but IVF was always my backup plan, right? Like, it's never anybody's first choice. It was always my backup plan. And I thought, well, if I can't, I have all these things going on, and if I can't get pregnant, then I'll do IVF. And I remember sitting in the doctor's office with my husband when he told us, look, you have diminished ovarian reserve on top of everything else. You have a better chance of hitting the lottery than getting pregnant, less than a 1% chance.
Oh, wow.
And if you're going to get pregnant at this point, you're going to need donor eggs. And it was absolutely devastating to think that was the path that was being laid out in front of me. And after absorbing the shock of all of that and kind of regrouping and grieving and all the things that are associated with prognosis like that, I kind of said to myself, no, I'm not going to accept that. I'm not going to go down that path until I have exhausted everything that is in my control that affects my infertility. And so, like anybody on an infertility journey, I was doing a ton of research and just delving into what affects your fertility. And I know that you've had other guests on the show that are doctors of traditional Chinese medicine. I did traditional Chinese medicine, diet, lifestyle changes. But the other things that I did are what make my story unique, I think, and what ultimately led to me getting pregnant. And those are things like addressing past trauma and my mental health along the way. Also taking a really proactive approach to my own medical records, my own testing, making sure that I wasn't just being told that this was okay, that this was taken care of. And one of the biggest things is I really tuned into my body, and I just didn't take for granted that somebody said, "Oh, you're fine. Your thyroid is fine." I didn't feel fine. I was still having symptoms. And so I really pushed for that personalized care that I help my clients get as well, because those things are huge when it comes to infertility. It can't be okay. It can't just be okay, right? We have to get it fine tuned, because your body is already telling you. My body was already telling me this is not working out for me. So, like you mentioned, at 35, I got that prognosis. I did these things. At within about 18 months, I got pregnant with my first son. And a lot of people, I think, look at my story and they think, "Oh, well, it's a fluke. It's a something. It's a miracle." And they are certainly miracles. But you can't say after 4 and after 7 diagnoses, which I could rattle those off for you if you want, but 7 different diagnoses, 7 years later, my youngest son was born. So I had my first at 36, 37. I had just turned 37, and I had twins then at 39. And then I had and then the same spacing, I had a miscarriage of twins. So around 41. And then my youngest son was born at 43. So I had stage 4 endometriosis. I had uterine fibroids. I had ovarian cysts. I had PCOS. I had thyroid disease. I had a blood clotting disorder. And 7 years after they told me, the medical community told me that I would need donor eggs without reproductive medical assistance, I had my last son.
That's 43. Insane. So no IVF.
My last good egg.
That's right.
Last good egg.
Like that. No IVF, no nothing. You did that on your own.
Nope.
That's insane.
Yeah. Now we could have gone the IUI route, but my husband and I, we had gotten him tested. He was fine. And we just felt like it was such a low percentage of success, somewhere between 5 and 10% success rate for anybody, that we just decided that we were not going to go that route.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least not, without doing all these other things first.
Right. What do you think made the biggest difference for you? Just whatever, lifestyle, diet, healing trauma, which part do you think made the biggest difference for you, and what finally kind of, tipped the scale?
Yeah. The answer to that question is yes. That's the hard answer that nobody wants to hear.
Right.
The answer to that question is yes, that overall health has to be the goal, and pregnancy is the outcome of that. And I had a lot of healing to do. My body was definitely telling me that. And my children are evidence of the healing that I did and that I had to go through in order to get them here. So it's not just when you're going through infertility, like your interview with your doctor of Chinese medicine, she was saying that's a foundational thing in your body. And if that is not working right, then that's indicative that you've got some systemic things going on in your body. So, everyone wants to take, not the easy route, but take the pill, take the easiest thing. And sometimes it's not the easiest thing in the world to heal your body, heal your gut, especially, is huge with infertility. And a lot of people don't want to face the trauma that they have not dealt with for years that is preventing them from getting pregnant too.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of where I wanted to take the conversation, I guess, the before and after. So when you were going through your healing and all of that, what methods were you using to help with that mental health aspect and like the dealing with the past trauma, like all of that? Was it therapy? Was it what was it that was working for you?
Yeah, at the time it was primarily talk therapy.
Hmm.
I did do I dabbled in a little bit of Reiki,
Hmm.
and I still don't know how I feel about that, but it did help me uncover some things that were going on, subconsciously, and brought them to light. So that was a gift. And then just leaning on my faith as well, was
Hmm.
something that just helped me cope mentally,
Hmm.
because I had to believe that what was happening to me was happening to me for a reason.
Right.
And I can very much see from, a rear view mirror point of view what that reason is. I mean, it's not only for my own health, it's for the health of my kids because they share my genetics, right? So
Hmm.
if I didn't learn how to live a healthier lifestyle and heal myself, I wouldn't have been able to help my kids
Right.
through the things that I've passed down to them
Hmm.
genetically, and just so many things, being able to help other people recognize what's going on in their body and be empowered, stand up for themselves in their medical journey,
Hmm.
right? And take responsibility for it too.
Right.
So
Right.
that's sometimes a really hard thing for people, to grasp is nobody wants you to have that baby more than you want to have that baby. And
Hmm.
so sometimes that's going to mean taking a lot of things that seem like they should be somebody else's responsibility into your own hands.
Yep. You got to advocate. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. What is, because you have a handful of books that I know you're going to talk about, you'll tell everybody about, but I know one of the things that you talk about is kind of the aftermath of like what happens after, right? And like we mentioned before we started recording, this is, I mean, it's something I don't think people are talking about really much at all. And the kind of the trauma of infertility and what that looks like after and what it looks like the things that the women who have gone through this have to deal with after the fact.
Yeah, I mean the after effect is from the daring too,
Right, right.
people don't recognize, even people that are deal in infant loss and grieving communities and things like that. There's this great divide between those communities, between infertility losses and infant loss.
Mm,
And the fact of the matter is that for myself, for these women that go through infertility, those losses feel the same.
right.
And so can you imagine not only the financial impact of spending $35,000 on a procedure or multiple procedures that not working out? Now you have multiple losses. So every time a transfer doesn't work, it feels like death for the woman going through that. It feels like a loss. And sometimes that's multiple months in a row.
Mm,
And the impact of that mentally is devastating. I don't think that anybody would wish that kind of loss on their worst enemy.
hmm.
But we have women out there, that have had double digit losses,
Right.
that eventually get pregnant, stay pregnant and deliver a baby. So unlike, their friends that go through pregnancy after you have lost so many pregnancies, so many transfers, so many opportunities, right? The whole time you're pregnant, these women typically feel like they're going to lose the pregnancy.
Right.
They are on pins and needles for 9 months. A lot
Hmm.
of them have nightmares about dying in
Hmm.
childbirth, about their baby dying during childbirth. I mean, a normal motherhood experience includes that, right? But when you amplify that by so many, like the stakes are so much higher, the volume is turned up full blast on
Right.
that, right? And so a lot of times then they bring the babies home, and there's not room for normal expression of
Mm.
motherhood. First time motherhood is super hard. I don't think anybody would deny that. And, just like they were isolated with their experience with their peers of not being able to get pregnant, without assistance. Now they can't complain that the baby's not sleeping or motherhood is hard or, oh my gosh, like I never imagined that my entire life was going to change. And they feel very constricted in being able to express themselves because everybody that knows that they've gone through an infertility journey is like, what do you mean? Like you got what you wanted.
You wanted this. Yeah.
Yeah. And you wanted it so bad. And like, even the most well-meaning of family members, it's a lot of pressure on new moms anyway, but there's a lot of pressure to kind of perform or put a mask on, and not express their true feelings of what's actually happening, because that baby was supposed to fix everything. That was the answer, right?
Right.
So the book actually came out. This is the book that we're talking about is Infertility Success to Postpartum Mess, What Nobody Tells You. And so this is part of the Infertility Success series. So this book actually is number 3, and it came out of our conversations as authors. So these are all book collaborations. So book number 1 is Infertility Success, Stories of Help and Hope for Your Journey. And as we were, we meaning the 20 authors that put these chapters together, because it's a book collaboration, we were talking about our experiences. We realized how similar experiences. So not everybody that is in book 1 signed up for book 3, but there are some repeat authors, and they tell their story through the lens of what it was like then to, after their infertility journey, bring that baby home, what they experienced, the postpartum anxiety and depression, and in some cases, psychosis, that happened from their experience. So,
yeah. So what is the healing process look like for that, the aftermath? Because I think the other piece, and you mentioned this earlier, the other piece is, you feel like you're talking about, I totally could see that, like feeling like the need to be like performative and like, oh, you paid, how many thousands of dollars for this baby and you want this baby. But then there also, I know that there's a lot of like guilt and shame involved too in the process. And why is it so hard for me? How come everybody else, like that whole thing? So dealing with the guilt and shame. And so what does the healing process look like? Just kind of coming to terms with all of that.
The guilt and shame of the infertility process and like the aftermath, like all of it. I think that looks different for everybody because it depends on what you're talking about foundationally, right? Like I have a trauma background, so I bring that trauma background with me to my infertility journey, right? Some people start off with no trauma, no mental, health issues, and infertility produces all this trauma and anxiety in them. So to answer your question, I think that looks different for everybody based on what you have found, what you're working with foundationally. But I've had talk therapy and EMDR and neurofeedback, and some of the women in the book, have done the same. They've done hypnotherapy and regression therapy. One of the things that I help my clients with is utilizing EFT tapping and AFT, as they go through their cycle so that they can process their emotions while they're experiencing them and don't carry those losses or those disappointments with them month after month. So we can't just keep stuffing that 800-pound gorilla back in his cage, right? So to answer your question, there's no easy answer. Sometimes it requires medication for people to come out of it. But women in general, and moms especially, are just not well supported and are just going to throw that generalization out there. We're just not very well supported. And then when you throw, all this other stuff, the baggage that comes with infertility along with that, then it's a lot to cope with.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's true. And I don't think, because even when we were talking about before we hit record, I don't think, and I've had, family, friends, people that I've known that have gone through this fertility thing. And I don't think they talk about, because I mean, honestly, if you've never gone through it, it's not really a thing you think about, thinking about this, like the aftermath part, like, oh, you finally get pregnant. Because then you think, like you said, you get pregnant. It's like, oh, it's fixed. It's done. Yay. It's, it's over. But there's this whole other piece of it that nobody's really talking about that is involved. And I don't think people recognize that. I don't think people think about that.
Yeah, it's traumatizing. I mean, one of the authors in the postpartum mess book, her children, are preteens now.
Mm-hmm.
And even to this day, she has to mute her Facebook friends that are posting pregnancy announcements. She has a hard time being around women who are pregnant. Like it's deeply scarring to women's psyche and their emotions. And, and that, again, that depth of, trauma is different from everyone, just, depending on where you're starting from and what you experience during the infertility journey.
That makes so much sense. It's funny you say that. This is not at the same level, but I feel the same. I struggle with breastfeeding with my kids. Like I just could not produce. Like I did, you name the thing, I did all the things, and it just, and I feel like that when I see people posting about, and there's a lot of mom shaming out there. People are like, breastfeed and it's like, sometimes people don't have that option. So I feel like that when I see Facebook posts about breastfeeding, it like still triggers me however many years later. So I could totally see that about infertility, like just that being just a triggering thing, seeing people with the baby announcement and they're talking about their pregnant, like that's a thing. That's a real thing.
Even though, and I think it's hard for people to understand because even though these women were successful,
right.
And if I was on the other side and I was still trying to get pregnant, that would be really hard for me to accept too, that this might be the rest of my life, even if I get what I want. So it's a lot for women to deal with.
Yeah. That's a lot of processing. So when I know in one of the books you talk about this too, and just giving the listeners some tangible things here. When looking back and kind of maybe sharing a little bit from I think you said it was the first or the second book, about you and other people who are sharing their experiences in these books, thinking like things I could have done or should have done or wish I would have done differently. Can you share any of those just to give the listeners some insight on, lessons that you have learned and other people in this experience have learned?
Yeah. So the books are not just memoirs. They're not just are us telling our stories for vanity. Like we really, as authors, all wanted to help women out there, who we consider sisters, still in the trenches of going through infertility, and help them from a rear view lens, a rearview mirror lens, and say, oh my gosh, if you are experiencing this is my story. I'm going to stop right here. Man, I wish I would have had this test done. I wish I would have asked my doctor this question. I wish I wouldn't have gone forward with this, or I wish I would have stopped this sooner, or whatever. And so all through the chapters, there are tips through every single one of the chapters. Both the first and the second book, More Stories, is also formatted like that as well, where we really wanted to, involve the reader and bring them into what was going on and how we could help them now that we were already through that. And there's a QR code at the back of each chapter, and the authors contributed resources, based on their experience. So, if the reader really connected with that author, we really wanted them to be able to have that personalized experience and be able to reach out to them and get something to help them on their journey. So
yeah, that's amazing. So what do you think, just from your experience, this is just totally your opinion, just putting it out there. Okay. What do you see as, like you were talking about how, just generally speaking, which I agree with you, women just aren't supported. But in this, specifically talking about infertility, the before, the during, and the after, what do you see as like the biggest gaps right now, and like the biggest things that would make the most impact on when women are in this scenario?
That is a huge question.
It is.
Let's see. Let me take it in chunks. So before, during, and after. So before they are trying to conceive, is that? Yeah. So I think that, because, and this is just my opinion, but what I'm seeing is, the World Health Organization has just come out this year that infertility has been declared as common. So we're now in a situation where infertility is not a rare occurrence, it's a common occurrence, and it's affecting more and more women every year. And so I'm not a big fan of waiting a year if you're before 35, or 6 months if you're after 35 of trying. We have women in our book. We have an author that was 23 and she had infertility, so this is not a situation where, like me, I was over 35. We would expect that maybe I would have problems or have infertility. I think that people are waiting too long and being too passive, right? They just keep hoping that things are going to get better. They keep trying every month and they're afraid, right? So don't be afraid. I would tell women, don't be afraid to get those tests, like figure out what your baseline hormone looks like. You can do that at your OBGYN and they're just going to do like a basic hormone panel, right? For all of your different hormones. So that's going to give you an indication at 25 or 30 or 35 of what your starting point is so that oh man, I'm 28 years old and my hormones are already jacked up. If I wait until I'm 35, what's going to happen? I mean, information is power. So waiting is not a big fan of waiting. I'm a big fan of doing all the things at the same time. So then you can prepare yourself, right? How can you be prepared if you're just literally taking a very passive attitude about the whole thing and thinking like women go years without investigating their fertility of trying to get pregnant. So if it's a priority and you really want to get pregnant and have kids, then take a proactive approach. So during infertility, along that same lines, like my free support group is Infertility Empowered. And that's really like my goal is to empower people to have conversations with their doctors, ask the right questions, get collaborative care. I mean, certainly my kids would not be here without the surgeries that I had, to remove my fibroids and remove my endometriosis and things like that. And they would also not be here if I didn't have 2 unsuccessful surgeries and push for a 3rd surgery of the same kind because I was still completely symptomatic, right? So we can't I think it's very common knowledge now that a lot of women's health conditions are overlooked. So we can't just ignore our symptoms in our bodies. Like my cycle was uncontrollable. I could barely function or work during my cycle. So regardless of getting pregnant, I had to figure out, a solution to that. And I had to push for that because nobody was experiencing it but me. And therefore nobody, cared as much as I did. But it was dramatic. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And so you have to be empowered and you have to look at your own testing. Okay. So everybody has a bad day, right? Everybody has a bad day. What if you see your doctor on their bad day? They're just human beings, right? And so they might miss, again, one of my authors who is a nurse practitioner herself took her colleague's word on a test. And then eventually she got her charts and she looked at it and she had been mistaken.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't anything that people just make mistakes sometimes, right? But it was a big glaring thing for her to have overlooked. And so you really do have to get a copy of your records. Almost all lab records come with a range, right? So if you went through 8th grade math, you can look at that scale and see, am I in range or out of range? Or if I'm really close to that range, what is that?
Right.
And ask your doctor about it. Like you don't have to be Dr. Google, right? We don't have to go to WebMD and figure everything out for yourself, but you can ask the question like, hey, I see I'm really close to one end or the other of this test. What does that mean for me? What would my symptoms be like if I was over the line, right? Because you're only talking about a couple points. So that you're over the line and maybe you're symptomatic, but you just never associated because as women, we ignore a lot of pain. We ignore a lot of symptoms. We normalize a lot of dysfunction and dis-ease in our body, right? That's just the hard truth about it. So just taking an active participant approach to your medical care is vital, vital. And then for post infertility, I would say, for those women more than any other moms, like you have to make space in your life for yourself. You have to keep chasing that healing is what it boils down to. For whatever reason, that's your path. And that's what I would say. For people that have, like so often happens with an infertility journey that have multiples, I had a 27-month-old and then I had twins. So I had 3 babies under the age of 2.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
it was a lot.
That's a
Any
lot. Yeah.
twin mom that makes it through the first year, I'm like I want to develop some kind of twin mom
You
signal to them,
totally
like
should. Yeah.
you did die the first year.
Right.
Congratulations.
Milestone.
um, yeah. Yeah. So it's intense. And I would say whatever that looks like for you, I know that not everybody has the financial means, but get creative, get some help. If I say this in all sincerity, if that means that you have to refinance your house, if that means that you have to sell a car, if that means that you have to move to a different state where your family is. I was fortunate in my neighborhood. I had a preteen that would come at dinner time. My husband used to travel for business, and I had these 3 little babies, and she would come down and just hold a baby while I put my older son to bed, and she was
Oh,
thrilled to be making a few dollars. And,
yeah.
You just need an extra set of hands. So
Mhm.
don't try to bootstrap it. That's what I would
Yeah.
say about
Yeah.
that.
No, that's such good advice. That is solid advice. Those are all very solid answers. Thank you for sharing and
Yeah.
your valuable opinion. So thank you. I love that. All of that. So as we're wrapping up here, I would love for you to share with everybody just where they can find out more about you and all of these books. I know you have books. By the time this is coming out, you'll have 2 more books that are out. So just where people can find out more about all of that.
Yeah, thanks. It's my website, Erica with a C. So it's Erica, and then Hoke. And I always say like your first name, like Hoke, but like hope, but with a K. So it's HOKE, is where you can find free resources. You can find more information about my courses and my private coaching. I have the free Facebook group on there that I mentioned as a support group where, I teach you how to talk to your doctor and things to look out for in your testing and that sort of thing. Now the books are available. I always feel like a commercial where books are sold now
But really
on
though.
Amazon. But really, that's what like Target, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's the Infertility Success series. Books 1 and 2 are Infertility Success, stories of help and hope for your journey. And then book 3 is Infertility Success to Postpartum Mess, What No One Tells You. And then the 4th book that we didn't get to talk about is Infertility Success, Faith, Stories of Faith and Miracles. And that is a faith walk. And again, we're just shining light where there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of people feeling very alone in their journey. And we want to shine a light on that. So, the 4th book is a spiritual journey, a spiritual walk of what happens when you go through infertility, that wrestling with God, that feeling like, why me? Am I being punished? What is this all about? What is this for? And that sort of thing. And it's meant to be helpful, not just our stories, just like the other books, so there's some insight in there in what that looks like if you're a person of faith.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think because those are all real valid thoughts. Like I love that you have a whole book honing in on that. I think that's important in any like trauma that you're going through, because I think everybody has those thoughts. Why me? What's this happening to me? God hates me, so I love that you've put that in because it's valid. Like those are valid feelings and thoughts. And yeah, I love that you have that highlighting that and kind of how to get to the other side of that. So what a good book.
Thanks.
Very cool. Okay. One last question I have for you that I like to ask everybody. What do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Oh, you sprung this on me.
My favorite way to do it, because then you have the answer.
Yeah. To live with purpose. I think that everybody has something to share with the world, their own personal experience that gives hope to somebody else. And that's really all I'm trying to do here, is provide that light in the darkness, that just because, a doctor has told you that they can't help you, doesn't mean that you can't get pregnant. Just because you can't afford IVF doesn't mean that you can't get pregnant. Just because for religious reasons or whatever, that doesn't mean that you can't get pregnant. Right. So many women are sitting out there, this is my purpose. So many women are sitting out there, they're leaving a doctor's office today and they're going home, rightly so. And they're crawling into their beds and they're never going to think about getting pregnant again. and maybe they'll stumble across some holistic healing and end up pregnant. And maybe they'll never get a chance to go down that path because they think that there's nothing that they can do to impact their fertility. And then they just kind of go the opposite direction down a path of self-destruction.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's really important for women to know that it's not the only way. And I know that this is something, you know, that you've been really shining a light on with some of your other guests. It's not the only way. There are definitely lots of these stories. Like my story might be the most outrageous that you've ever heard, but my story is not unique. There's thousands of us that are making these changes that have, I mean, I always say that I'm the least likely woman that you would ever meet to get pregnant. And if I feel like if I can do it once, not once, but 4 times, then anybody almost, I have to caveat that because, you know, there are situations, but you know, that there's definitely hope for quite a few women out there.
Yeah. I love it. And you're sharing that with the world. Thank you so much, Erica, for sharing your gift and your insight and your wisdom on all this. Such a good conversation and so important for women who are going through this. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I so appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I'd love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I can know how to provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics you'd like to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza, or you can visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.